if you're trading in the pit and, you have a wife and kids and a mortgage and everything else, you're going to hunt what you can in your comfort zone. You don't really care about me, really, but I know that I was wrong and you were right. And so doing something like that creates an environment that it's a higher level than competitive. It's very primal, gang up on people, you gang up on orders, you hunt like a pack, you hear about stops. All of those things are done, in a group. And in really busy markets, there was this saying, don't trade with anybody unless you can touch them.
Hi, everyone. I'm Maggie Lake. Today, I'm going to share some stories from the floor, and in this case, from around the stack with JJ, known on Substack as Alyosha. Alyosha, I got it. Author of the twice daily Market Vibes newsletter. We're gonna jump into what that name is all about in a second. But JJ, it's so nice to have the opportunity to chat with you.
Thank you, Maggie. I'm glad to be here.
So we've spoke a little bit before. I reached out after I read one of your great pieces. And so you have a long background trading commodities at the NYMEX. Is that right?
Yes. I've been trading for about 50 years. I started at the bottom on Wall Street in the early 70s, got a job as a sales guy, made some money, bought a seat on the floor because that's where I wanted to be. Actually, I bought 2 seats. And, my career took off as a trader.
So working on Wall Street in the 70s must have been crazy.
Yeah, it was fun. I mean, starting off as a runner, there were runners all over the place. The runners got to be pals. We had lunch together. In the early days, I had hair down the middle of my back, bell-bottom jeans, but I knew immediately when I got there what I wanted to do.
Yeah, you could feel it. There's something different. I mean, we don't even have open outcry floors anymore, but there just seems to be a different dynamic when everyone's together in the same room.
I suppose there are still similar environments in the very large trade houses where they have hundreds of employees trading regionally across products and things like that. Whenever the markets are moving a lot and you put a lot of people together, there's a lot of yelling. I'll say that.
Yeah. Well, we joke sort of like newsrooms. They can feel similar when there's stuff going on. So how did you always know you wanted to do finance? How did you get involved in that?
Actually, I was just chatting on Substack with a guy who reached out to me. His name's John Coleman, and his grandfather was a friend of my dad's, and they both lived at the Beekman at 575 Park Avenue. So one day, probably in June or early July, I saw Bill Coleman, this guy's grandfather, in the bar with my dad. And Bill bought me a Brandy Alexander kids drink, it's milk and brandy. And he offered me a job. So for a few weeks, I reported the exchange, ran around, did a lot of errands, and I got to see the floors. And in those days, the stock exchange was, it was alive. It was a very exciting place to be. And so later on, that year I went away to boarding school in Spain. And then when I came back, I never saw them again or did anything like it. But later on, I always remembered that. And after a sequence of post-college odd jobs, I found myself on Wall Street.
What is it that attracted you so much to the floor? Because it's crazy, it's cutthroat. I mean, there are some really tough things about it.
Yeah, it's exciting, and it was the most egalitarian environment I've ever seen in my life. Some of the best traders I ever met didn't graduate from 8th grade. The only thing that was required of you is that you could do arithmetic very quickly in your head accurately, you were honest, and you showed up. Those were the 3 requirements, and as long as you met those standards, particularly in the 70s, you rose very quickly.
So what do you remember about those early days on the floor? Did you have imposter syndrome? I mean, it's just so fast. Everything happens so fast, and there's a lot of money at stake. I mean, was it hard to adapt to that? Were you intimidated?
No, not at all.
Just dove in?
Not in the least. No, because as I said, you had to have a lot of basic skills. And if you're around that environment, there are crazy people. But the first real boss I had, his name was Norton Waltuck. And he is, I would say, one of the great all-time desktop speculators. He wore plaid pants. He smoked a foot-long cigar. He cornered sugar twice. When I was first getting into the business, corner juice, cocoa, these were corners. And he was a key player in the silver squeeze in 1980, which being close to him changed my life completely.
How so?
It taught me what was possible. How a tiny amount of money, I was filling orders with a guy named Mel Schnell in the silver pit at the time. And my cheese, Frankie Lacey, who'd been there a couple of years before me, made $4 million standing right next to me. So, of course, I did what Frankie did. And I didn't really know what I was doing. Of course, yeah, when silver came down, everybody lost everything. We all had to start over again.
It is interesting, particularly working in commodities, I think, as opposed to, say, the stock exchange or like in the equity market, because commodities are boom and bust like that. I mean, fortunes can be made, but the markets move so quickly.
It was in those days. First of all, let me say, we didn't have Bloomberg, we didn't have news, we didn't, anything that you knew, someone told you, and you learned, to read the markets by the people around you. So the pit was a community of guys, maybe 200-300 guys. Some had a lot of money, some were very important. If you looked at it from a anthropology perspective, we were just like a tribe of apes. We had the big ape, right? These were the senior guys. You didn't challenge them. They were the little apes. You had to know your place. You had to learn to be humble. Otherwise, you'd get squished. And, you had to trade according to the amount of money you had. In other words, if you went over your skis, you were out, period. The market just, boom, gone. So you had to be able to manage money right away and make friends. Very important, to be well liked. So, in terms of what's happening today, we are siloed. We're very silent. All we have is our screens. Everything is being driven by server farms that are far, far away. And in those days, everything was a human thing.
Did it feel sort of more truthful, easier to figure out? Did it make it more difficult? In theory, information should make it easier, right? The more information we have, it should make it easier, but it doesn't always feel like that.
Trading is not easy, no matter what you're doing, right? The difference is if you're in the pit, everybody has different ideas. So I'm 2-bit. You sell me 50 at 2, right? So I know because I wrote on my card, I bought 50 at 2 from you. You sold them to me. And if it goes to 1, you're looking at me like you don't really care about me really, but I know that I was wrong and you were right. And so doing something like that creates an environment that is, it's a higher level than competitive. It's very primal. And, gang up on people, you gang up on orders, you hunt like a pack, you hear about stops. All of those things are done, in a group. And in really busy markets, there was a saying, don't trade with anybody unless you can touch them. Because if you're trading across the ring, you can easily make mistakes. But, all of these things that we try to, and I think, when we went electronic, I'll take an off ramp here for a second. Everybody thought that they could take all of the things that they learned and write them in code and then apply them to the markets. But that doesn't work. I tried it. I learned to write in C# and VBasic and things like that. And it doesn't work. What has happened is the only certain ways, very limited certain ways to make money every day, like Jane Street reported today that they made 14 billion last quarter. So the only way that someone can actually do that is either to front run, see orders coming, get in front of them, buy in front of them, sell to them, and so forth like that, and cheat. So opacity is, one of the things that we had on the floor. So there was a lot of cheating because no one knew what was going on down there. But it's much, much harder to see behind the curtains now what's going on because it's all being done in silence by machines. So they thought, hey, we've got to kick these bad guys off the floor and make it honest. Just doing the same thing. Only
Yeah.
There's,
So you think that it's just that there's cheating going on, or that you think some people know how to game the system?
Well, they're both the same thing, right? I think.
Yeah.
I think there was a higher level of personal honesty in those days than there is now, because personal honesty isn't required now. There's a set of rules, a hierarchical way of doing things, and everything is box to box, moving at hyperspeed. You can't really even see the true quotes going to the exchange because trades are going in at speeds of 5 microseconds, meaning 10,000 trades could easily be going through and cancel in a single minute. So, of course, that's impossible. Humans cannot perceive that at that level. So it's a completely different thing. In the old days, someone was, there were two types of honesty. One is, as legitimate rules imposed by the exchange and the government, and the other was the exchange rules, the things that you did not do to other members. And those two came together and conflicted. So, as I say, it's something you can't even see.
Yeah, it feels that way. Somebody was just commenting just in general, right? Even across anything, social media, there are no consequences, because you're never facing the person you say anything to or do anything to. It all seems like that sort of level of personal responsibility is removed. It sounds like you're kind of talking about the same thing with the markets, which is such a different world.
Yeah, but trading is trading, right? You have to have a favorable difference between where you buy and when you sell, or else you're forced to stop doing it. So anyone who went to the floor of the exchange, we all started. It's like high school, right? You're freshmen. You don't know what's going on. So and then you have mentors around you because there are good guys who are actually teaching you how to survive. The first day I went in the ring was a really like a watershed day for me because I was put up for membership by a highly respected guy. So guys came around to me and they said, I buy 10 at 1 and I say 10 at 1, 10 at 0.5, right? So that's $500. And by the end of the day, a number of the members had come around to me and I had about $6,000 in my trading account. That was not my money. This was given to me by the membership. I was being inducted by ritual. And this guy, Johnny Izzo, took me aside and he said, okay, kid, now you have some money in your trading account. You never put money in a trading account. You only take money out. I thought, well, that's pretty good. Somebody else said, you never be poor again, kid. You're never going to be poor again. And so it was like a guild. We weren't there. Some traders were utter geniuses. And as I said, some of them did not graduate from 8th grade. Everybody wore ties. The environment was dignified. No, I won't say everybody. And by the time we got into the late 70s, when people were making an incredible amount of money, they were smoking crack in the bathrooms, doing all kinds of crappy stuff. But at any rate, in the early days, it was somewhat formal.
That's a crazy concept, making fortunes on the floor and smoking crack in the bathroom. I mean, that can't last long.
Well, no, it wasn't as though everyone did it.
There's always a few.
Some people did it,
There's always a few wild men.
But there were also, just extraordinary moments where, it would be, I think I sent you a story or something that I wrote about crude, and I asked you to read the last two paragraphs about how, I think this is around 99, 2000, maybe 2001, we went into the roll. The roll was the index roll where hundreds of billions of dollars had to match settlement. And in the last 2 minutes, NYMEX crude had the longest settlement of all the exchanges in New York. There were 8,000 people on the floor. Every one of them were focused on what they were doing. The amount of volume that went through the exchange was just insane, and in those 2 minutes. And at the end of the day, Mike Wump, heck of a nice guy, he's sitting on the steps and he looked at me, I thought, what's up, Mike? And he said, no one will ever know what we did here today. And so, and it's very hard. I often thought about writing about it. And sometimes, in the moment, there might be some instance where it's germane to what I'm thinking about as a writer, but it's impossible to write about it in an extended way or from a long story type novel perspective, because it's just too much boredom in the middle.
When he says they won't believe what we did today, what do you mean by that? Just the amount of trades that you were humanly able to clear? This is before computers, right?
Well, yeah, transactions are all verbal, right? So you had not only have to identify the opposing buyer, write his name down, make sure the quantities are accurate, and doing, I think, in that compressed 2-minute period for those few years, every month from the 5th to the 9th business day of the month, and particularly the last day of that, even the 4th day was really crazy. Everything had to get done. There was no aftermarket. There's no, hey, wait a second, let's, you had to get it all done. It had to be correct, or it was very expensive. And so it's we were doing as a community of maybe three or 400 guys who showed up every day. Most of them had millions of dollars with absolutely nothing other in their mind than if you wanted to sell it, they'd buy it. And if you wanted to buy it, they'd sell it. And all of that would come together on the close.
Yeah, it's all of those people working really complex transactions in microseconds, sort of synchronized together. It's we it's kind of like a human computer in action, the way we think about it now, which is, I think, an extraordinary thing to have been a part of. There are always, I talked to two guys who worked on the New York Stock Exchange as well, and there's so many parallels between the things that you talk about. There did seem to be such a sense of brotherhood, I guess you'd call it.
Absolutely. We spent more time with each other than we spent with our families. If you're working on the floor of the exchange, 10 hours a day, that's 50 hours a week, and you did that for 30 years. There are people like I went to work for ADM in the very last part of my career, and I walked to the office. I saw a guy, and I knew who he was. I knew what he looked like, but I didn't know his name. But I had probably traded with him thousands of times on the other side of the pit in crude. And his name turned out to be, maybe not thousands, but many, many, many times over years, right? And he knew me, I knew him, but we didn't know who we were. And it was like, hey, how you doing? And nice to actually make your acquaintance. I was going to say, when you're talking about what people can do, you really don't really understand what you can do until you do it. And, although we, alienated in a way by our careers, like you couldn't go to a cocktail party and say, this is what I did today, because, they would say, I wonder if my toast is ready or something. So, but we knew. And I would liken it to the way bees work in a hive, birds flock like this, right? Fish in a school. There's no language or rules or anything like that. They know what to do. They know what to do. And that was very much the way it was, trading open outcry in the pets.
That's why I think it's so hard, because you have to, when you're new to it, you have to fit into that very complex mechanism almost instantaneously. Like one small person who gets it off throws the whole thing. So that must be so much pressure. Do you remember working with people who kind of rose through the ranks? Like who stands out in your mind that you crossed over with and you thought, oh, they're clever? Did they stay in commodities? Did they go into investment banking? How did that work? Did they open funds?
Well, okay, sure. Some of the most successful names in hedge funds that started in those years, either at Commodity Corp or at Shears and Lehman, talking about really, really, really successful people, at one point or another came through the floor. And one in particular, I won't mention his name, but I would say he could easily be called a Skyan. It was the worst floor broker I ever met. Just total idiot. I mean, he'd be buying fives. We're trying to sell him twos. Hey, wait, it's at two, right? So anyway, but his ability to find intuitive truth in all the complexities around us, and be right, was extraordinary. It really was. And of course, brought him fame and fortune. He's multi-billionaire now. I know several guys like that. I've always, I'll say this, you say it's hard to understand. The way that it worked, as I said, it's a guild. You go in as a runner and you're write-up clerk, so you always have the noise around you, right? Every day. So for a couple of years, then you work your way up as fast as possible. You're an order clerk. Pick up the phone, guy in the line. Where is it? Had to know, right? 1020. Buy 100 up to 30. Boom. So you're a part of the process now. So by that time, it's like being young and going to France, right? You only know how to speak English, but 6 months later, if you're going to school in France, you're speaking French. And you're not only speaking it, you're fluent with all the idioms and everything else. So that's the way it works.
Yeah, you better be. Otherwise, you're not going to make it interesting. People are good at some things and not good at others. It's interesting that, even the sort of masters of the universe, not all of them were cut out for trading, which is why I think it's or that kind of trading, why it's such an interesting experience to have, and so much more difficult than I think. Everybody thinks they can trade, right? Like everyone thinks they especially now because we all have the apps, and you could do it on your phone, and it's tempting to think that
It's
it's that
easy to say
easy.
yes. Let me say that. So if you have an app, you have a vibe, it's really easy to like put a number in and click, right? Once you have it on, that's a completely different story, you know. And a lot of people don't know how to lose. 90% of good trading is losing. Anyone can adjust their thinking to winning lotto, right? That's great. Oh, I bought 50. One time I won on a whim. I wanted a gold options. Some option, I don't know why, was offered at 10 cents. And on a whim, I bought 100. It cost me $1,000, right? For some reason, something happened overnight and gold came in $25 higher. So, I made a lot of money. These things, can happen, right? You you run into good lucky streaks. But in order to make money consistently, which is what we had to do because it was our job, you had to make money every day, which means you had to have a number in your head before you went in. Say, I want to make 5 grand today. A great friend of mine, Mark Galen, sort of figured it out. Hey, if I make 4,000 a day, I make $1 million a year. So that was what he wanted to do. He wanted to make $4,000 a day. And when he did it, right? So if you can do that 15 of 20 trading days, you have a pretty good living. And if you're trading in the pit and you have a wife and kids and a mortgage and everything else, you're going to hunt what you can in your comfort zone. Today it's I have that because I've learned to do that, but it's very hard to impart that to someone and say, this is what trading is. A lot of people think trading is like being a genius, having vision. A handful of people can do that, Druckenmiller or whatever, you know. Or you can use a computer to give you exceptional advantages like Citadel or Jane Street. That'll make money for you. But if it's just you, Maggie Lake, here's 100K, make money every day. It's easier if you know what you want to make and accept it when you get it.
And what do you mean knowing how to lose is the key? Because a lot of your trades are going to be losing trades. It's just minimizing the loss.
At least half of them are going to be losing trades. You know, and if you're on the floor for us anyway, my job was to make prices, not to, as I said, nobody was writing, detailed, brilliant theses like Jeff Curry about where gold is going to go, and he was wrong as often as anybody else. You wanted to get the edge, try to make 50 cents here, 20 cents there, catch a buck. Every now and then you sell a 50 to somebody and the market hoses, right? And you're like, oh, wow, I just got $3 on that. I'm up 15K. That's just great. It's pretty hard to screw that one up, right? It can be done, but
Often, evidently. So how do you, I'm thinking that you go to the exchange as a smart person, right? Even if the guys who didn't make it through 8th grade, but you're smart, you get some confidence when you're there. It's got to be uncomfortable when a majority of the time you're losing. How do you detach your own self from that? How do you get comfortable knowing that you're going to lose a lot of the time?
well, first of all, the amount you're losing is the first thing that you're gonna get used to, right? If you're looking to make, a couple grand or 5 grand, 10 grand, whatever your number is, or something like that, and you go down, you shouldn't allow yourself to go down much money on a trade. You always want to be looking for if you're looking for, let's say now, like I buy S&Ps in the morning because they're always going up, so I'm always looking for a break to buy, and I don't care where that comes, but I try not to pay up for a market that I'm bullish on. I like to be bullish and then let them give it to me at a cheap price. That way, if I'm wrong, at least I'm not big wrong. So I do that. We used to have a saying on the floor: never buy gold when it's up on the day, ever. You should be selling gold on the up. It was very much, the market maker's mentality. If you can't accept a loss, you can't accept a profit. It's very, very very binary like that. When the market gives you the money, you win. You have to take it. A lot of people have trouble doing that. Oh no, I'm right. I want more. I'm going to hold on. All that. It's just very dangerous thing to do. So set your parameters. You should always have a stop. particularly today. Never get into something where you don't have a stop, and don't mess around with a stop. Put the thing in and go make some toast, it's over. Your trade is done. And it will either work or it won't. And if it works, you'll know it. You can see if going, you just take the money. I know a guy who's been trading, I met him in the 80s. A very, very senior guy in the banking community, managed a huge amount of risk and so forth. Probably one of the best desktop traders I know. He does this with thousands of lots. But it's just bigger. He's like a guy who's a ship captain of a great freighter, and other guys run around in speedboats. Kind of more the speedboat kind of guy. But and I like to be flat at night. I hate taking a good trade home and coming in the next morning and having it be a bad trade. It just kills me.
Which is why you write a morning and evening piece, so you can shut the book on it. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, that's true.
I first reached out to you on Substack after I read a beautiful piece you wrote about, and this is more in the life lesson side of it, which you do from time to time. A beautiful piece you wrote about telling your daughter, I believe she was your grown daughter, about a really difficult period that you had. And some of the lessons that you learned from that. Even though you have this discipline, it's kind of easy to let it go. How did that period, or how did that episode kind of inform you? I just thought it's such a great life lesson to share.
Of all the choices you make, I think the biggest choices that you make as a young person is whether or not you're going to be honest, or whether or not you're going to be dishonest. And the floor forces that decision on everybody right away. Most of the successful people I know are all honest people. Although I did know a few guys who had a really bad reputation for being, they used to write their names in the bathroom walls and so forth and say, this guy's, a thief and all that other stuff. They also made a lot of money, but many also went away to prison. I never wanted to be that. And so, I think what happened to me in the 90s, this is a period of the 90s, I was really successful early in my life. I was a great sales guy. Just, I was young enough to be fearless. So whenever I saw people who were doing things that I thought I wanted to do, I did them too. And in trading, that's how you learn, right? Monkey see, monkey do. You have your own personal experiences. But when those things are paying you a lot of money, you begin to believe in them in ways which also have bad side effects. You can become arrogant, narcissistic, spend a lot of money on clothes, waste money, think you're better than other people. There's a whole lot of that going on, especially if you're young and you make a lot of money quickly. So in the 90s, I had a really hard time. Gold died. I couldn't make money trading a dead market. I hadn't reconciled all of the psychological challenges of losing, because that's what happens, when you're losing, your back's to the wall. I just, I got lucky, I guess, I got lucky. That's all. I had a reputation which was still good, so it was easy for me to get a job. And I got it because of some things, the way they came together. I got a good job. I went to crude oil, and I started making a lot of money again. So it was, I guess those were my all-time lows.
Did you feel, were you tempted to, it sounds like you sort of made a choice to stay honest, even if the consequences were being broke. Then was there a moral hazard in that?
No, it wasn't. There was just, actually, sometimes there are no choices, right?
That's what I mean. But you could have made money, I suppose, if you did it another way, but you weren't willing to do that.
Not really. Yeah, I could have sought it out maybe, but that doesn't work either. You really have to, the thing about trading, working on the floor of the exchange, is that life is very binary. Numbers are numbers. A 5 is a 5, a 6 is a 6. Losing is losing, winning is winning. And it was too late for me to go out and find another career, or maybe I could have, but that would have been impossible. I had kids in private school, and I had a nice house, and I wanted to hang on to it, so I was willing to fight for it. And as I say, everybody has, I think, you're dealt a hand of cards, and you just have to play them. So I got lucky, I got a break, and it went my way. And then I was able to get out of gold, go to crude, and thank God for that.
Thank God. Exactly. Did you know the person who was trading crude that you went to work for? I mean, is it in the same pit or was that a big leap?
Not really. I was always a pretty good sales guy. You know, I was kind of like the beat up, banged up uh, Ferrari and needed a lot of money to fix up. Really, that would be it. And so a couple guys, at Refco thought, let's give this guy a shot, and they did, and it was good for them, and it was good for me. And I
I feel like a lot of people hit a point where they feel like they're the beat up Ferrari and they need a good injection or they need a fresh coat of paint or something. I think a lot of people probably can sympathize with being in that position, having to like pivot or start over or something.
well, you had to have the basics. When you go to the floor, you had to make some basic choices. You had to be good at math. You had to be good at arithmetic. You had to be well liked, make friends, right? And that's essential for a sales guy, right? If you're a jerk, people don't care. I'll say this: nobody cares about having a genius in your life every day. They really don't. They don't want to hear it, right? Okay, yeah, you're smart. That's good. Okay, you were right. That's great. Click. What they really want is someone that they enjoy working with, that adds the right kind of components to their life in the right way consistently. And I never lost that. That was, I was generally very well liked by everybody. Even though I wasn't making money, the floor is keenly aware if you're not making money. And nobody wants to know you if you're not making money, if you work in trading or Wall Street or anything, right? So on the one hand, I was a Ferrari. On the other hand, I was completely beat to shit. And they say good things happen to cheap stocks. And that happened to me.
That's amazing. Was your daughter surprised to find out? Because they didn't know at the time, right? Which I think you said in the piece. Was she surprised to find out that you went through this really difficult period? Because, we tend to see successful people and think it's always success. Sometimes we don't see the fight.
I think it was enlightening, you know, and it was a ritual. What did I call it? Rites of passage, right? For both of us. It's not something I talk about, you know, or I have spoken of. It's something I wrote about, and I don't even know why I did it. And I was totally shocked by the response it got. I was like, wow. It was really just meant to be a kind of, how you may have not have read some of my other stories, but they're very, very not market speak or anything like that, right? Occasionally a little bit of something that is really very much just life experiences that were paralleling me while I was doing this other thing. I'm not sure which I care about more.
Yeah. Well, I think there's so much value in that, right? And we're all, going through things. I think that's why it resonated with so many people because, there's a thread through all of us that we've either experienced or we've seen or we're going through. And I think that kind of sharing of that wisdom is so critical. It's interesting because when we're talking about your writing, you could have just retired. I mean, some people are like, oh, God, having spent 4 decades in the market like that, even with that fantastic last act, forget it. I'm done. I'm going out on the farm. I don't know what, raise chickens. And instead, you write twice a day about the markets. What is it about the writing that's so appealing to you?
I love it. I have always been a broker who writes. Even when I, first started writing, I actually, another Refco guy, Alex Manzara, really great guy. He's still working. He works for R.J. O'Brien in Chicago. He used to send out these morning pieces, just a few lines, just way before Twitter, maybe even before the internet. I can't even remember.
Which I love. Some people will pick them up off the floor when we say that, but like there are those of us who remember the days before you could just have a computer in your hand. It's
So
true.
I read them, and I enjoyed reading them because the kind of content that exists, in the general space, in the media space, Maria Bartiromo and all this, of course, you have to consume it, with a very long spoon. But the kind of content you find on Substack among the many, many writers and people like you, it's real. It's it's artistic in a way. It has shadows, it has depth. I never write, a plain declarative sentence. It's got to have something in it. It's going to have some kind of spicy word, or it's going to have to be connected to something that makes you feel something. Otherwise, why bother? Just pay Bloomberg 30 grand a year and read that.
you have your share of spreadsheets you could go over. Yeah, there's something really sort of fantastic at that intersection. I think that's well worth it. What's the story behind, which of course I messed up as soon as I said it, Alyosha? What is the story behind that? Why pick that name?
So it was suggested to me, if I were going to write on Substack, that I should have an avatar or some kind of a pseudonym or something like that. I've never done that before, but I didn't expect to have, thousands of people reading my work every day. So that was good. I thought about, uh, baseball players and, you know, ancient philosophers, and none of that really fit. And I needed I needed to have a spiritual hero on my shoulder. And Alyosha is one of the brothers Karamazov in Dostoevsky's masterpiece, The Brothers Karamazov, which I bumped into when I was, you know, taking Russian literature in the Mesozoic era. And I remembered it. My daughter read the book. She's light years ahead of me on an intellectual and academic level. And she used the name Alyosha as her password to Netflix.
Hope she's changed it now.
Anyway, so I thought, Alyosha is in every sense known to readers who like that kind of stuff, that type of 19th century Russian literature, a spiritual hero. So I figured, nobody's going to know what that is, and they don't, or many don't, and so I decided to use that. It's different,
Fantastic.
you remember it.
Totally different. Well, they don't know what it is until now, right? But that's one of the great mysteries. I love when you see people what they name themselves and why. I'm going to be having the blind squirrel on soon. I can't wait to hear the story. Maybe it's the only AI character he knows how to make. I'm not sure, but that's going to be really fun. But I think it's fascinating.
He's a great guy. Yeah, I just had fun with him.
Well, JJ, it's such a delight to just share a little bit of your story with everyone. I know so many people read your pieces and love the lane you're in, of touching on some of that humanity and the kind of struggles and the philosophy behind it, as well as the bringing your sort of really deep experience of trading to everyone. So thank you so much for taking the time. I loved it.
So very welcome. And thank you for inviting me. It's been a pleasure.